number one.
Beer number one is Eyinger Celebrator Doppelbock. This is your beer, although you probably don't have it in front of you, Laura.
Yeah, I don't. I feel that I'm obligated to drink a beer, even though it's not time to go look. So I'm bringing.
This is one that you should look for.
It's exploding and spilling all over the place. And because I kicked Chris out to, mow the grass on the other side of the house, I can't beg him for a towel this time. There we go.
There you go.
This is a blast from the previous. Yeah.
Because this first reading is all about fasting, not eating for periods of time. And the Doppelbock style, I feel like I just poured a Doppelbock at either last episode or the one before.
Was it the one made by the monks?
So a Doppelbock was invented by Pauline monks in Germany as the sustenance during the Lent fast. So they wouldn't eat.
Wow.
They drink
So technically,
rich malty beer, and that would get them through the period of fasting.
Perfect.
Right, fasting.
Well, I gotta say, in my own experience with priests and monks, they're all about the alcohol.
I've often said that's why I'm Catholic. It's for the wine and the donuts.
Oh, excellent.
Apples, grapes, potatoes, all of it in a glass.
All right, cheers.
Cheers. Should bring us up, again, thank you for providing me the perfect segue to what I'd already written. Your book does talk about a man named Jim Kernan. I believe that's an alias.
Oh, I love this. Can I tell this story about the violin?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
It's the same story.
Oh, I can't even. It's my favorite. And if we ever finish this fiction, it has to go in there. So he went to the St. Peter Asylum, and his name isn't Jim Kernan, it's just a pseudonym. But he went in there at the same time that he would have been in the men's ward. They have social functions and meals and such together. So it's possible he met Martha. He talks about a woman who reads poetry on stage for everyone to enjoy. So it's possible. And he also mentions meeting an individual when he first went in who is standing in front of a blank music stand playing the air violin, if you can imagine, Michael, the banjo. And he's playing this. And Jim is a little bit confused, thinking this guy is way off his rocker, but he's not. So he says, "Sir, what are you doing?" And he says, "Well, what else am I supposed to do when I'm in here?" And I think that just sums up, like, when you're in there and there's nothing else to do, and quote unquote, everyone around you is going through something, what else is there for you to do? Who else is there for you to be?
Actually, that calls to mind a very fascinating story I read a long time ago, and it might go to the question I had about how did Martha maintain her sanity through almost 7 years there? But years ago, I actually read about a man who was a prisoner of war, I believe in Korea. He was an American. And it just so happened that before going off to war, he was a concert level pianist. And so he was captured. He was kept in solitary confinement, I think, for 7 or 8 years. So it actually was close to the same time Martha was in. And as you probably know, most people are going to go crazy. We're not designed for solitary, we need company. But what he did was every day he went through his scales, bum, 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 bum. And he actually did the fingering on an air piano. And then he would go through, probably his hand exercises, and he would play from memory, actually moving his fingers in front of him, every single concert piece he had memorized ever. And when he came out of solitary confinement, not only was he sane, he could play piano just as well as when he went in. Wow. And me think maybe that's part of what this man was doing. Maybe he wasn't just pretending. Maybe he was going through actual pieces. It's an interesting
I've actually learned, we're on a lot of social media sites, and there actually is a social media site for poetry therapists. And I'd never heard of this as we've delved more into mental health and the mental health community. And there is a certified poetry therapist outreach to help people express themselves in that way. So maybe Martha was a little before her time, but
Martha expresses in this poem her belief that her former friends will fear her, that even after being released, the very fact that she was there at all will leave her shunned for life. Was that what happened? What was her life like after her release?
Oh, this is another one where there's a few hypotheses. I think she really feared it, but we have actually been able to create relationships with the entire neighborhood, all those that have living descendants. And they stayed together for 4 generations, this entire little neighborhood. So we have working relationships with the children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of the neighborhood.
Wow.
And they have stories that line up, supporting Martha, being friends with her, relating how she was very generous and friendly. And so there's such a positive memory of who she was that it's very hard to think she came home and really people shunned her, because for generations they knew her and loved the family. And they have we have pictures of all the kids growing up on the same street.
That's really neat.
All in
And
each other's homes.
you have some of those pictures, Sandy, don't you?
I do have some. I pulled out one of Martha and her son, Ralph. And this one, let's see if I can do this for Zoom. This is her right after her 1927 surgery, and she cannot walk. This is, I think, a couple weeks after her surgery. And so he is not even in first grade yet, and he has to walk with one of the neighbor moms because she can't even walk him to school. And you can see in the picture, she has, let's try that again. She has a very not quite happy face, maybe a little forlorn. Yes, she's aware that things are not going well. And it's the same face, in my opinion, as this picture here. This is her when she came out of the asylum. And I think one thing to see here that we couldn't see when she turned her face away is the asymmetry in her face. Something clearly has shifted. And it's the same expression of, this is who I am and this is what I live with every single day. And so I think that is just really touching.
Another thing that really came up in my mind is what you know of Martha's husband at the time. Did you ever personally know Louis?
I was pretty young when he passed away, so there's certainly family photos. I'm in family photos with both Louis Jr. and Martha as a baby, and then the last time I saw Martha, I was 10 years old, and it was a very traumatic experience. I write about that in the book in the introduction, that my last memory of her, she was in a nursing type home facility, and she was literally in the bed shaking and wailing and saying that the demons were coming to get her. So as a 10-year-old girl, I was terrified. It was very traumatic.
I can believe it. Right. One of the questions that I had about Ralph was, again, the question of intention. So she'd received this perfumed letter, and, my first thought was to assume that, yes, he was cheating on her. And then I later thought, on the other hand, it could have been some crazy woman who, thought that she could start something.
Attraction.
Right, exactly. Except that guy actually did do something. But I was wondering if from your research, she tried to divorce him over this letter and her belief that he was cheating on her, and things weren't great when she came home. I believe you say in the book, because she really couldn't forgive him. But was this a case of so many women were committed for so many things in those days Do you think that he was deliberately, conveniently getting rid of her, or do you think that he honestly trusted the doctor and just said, well, you know, he's a doctor, he must know what he's doing? What I would love to do is write a fictionalized account of this from either side, one that he really is the villain and one that he's just believed the doctor and didn't know what else to do. I think that's a fascinating story. And I wish, you know, it's probably gone to the grave with him.
It's interesting that you say that, because we had talked about the idea of doing a fictionalized version. And we do want to leave it up to the reader to form their own conclusions. But some of the back and forth Janelle and I went through while we were writing the book was, you know, I didn't want Lewis Jr. to necessarily be a villain, because I always feel like, even in retrospect, there's two sides of the story.
Yep.
And yet I felt great empathy for Martha, and I didn't want to paint her as,
yes,
you know, write her off because she's insane.